CBC, or better yet, the elusive equalizer, that is education, and the status of it in the country is what we discuss. Of course, done with sports, done with a bit of news. Maybe later on we're looking at whether there's anything that comes up. But at this very point, allow me to once again introduce the guest that I have. I think some of us are just joining in, and therefore it's important that they get to know. Right next to me is John Mugu, who is the Executive Director of Zizi Afrique Foundation. Asante sana for creating time. And Christina Kelo is the Education Programs Officer of GESI. Once again, karibu sana. And then we have Brian Bosire, Head of Play Teach for Kenya. And before we took that break, of course, the biggest question that we're asking is, in as much as the government says that they have addressed all the concerns that we would have to address, but they say we have done it, by a large chunk. They talk about transition and placement, TIC. They say available infrastructure, TIC. We talk about equity, TIC, and very many other things that they talk about. How is it then that today we are talking about education, or perhaps the competency-based curriculum, as a complex equalizer, if you'd want to call it?
Yeah, just to note that CBC was not meant to solve all the problems that are bedeviling the education system.
All right.
So CBC is largely addressing the relevance issue. Are our children learning what they should be learning? But aspects of access, are children going to school or not? Right. Are they more absent or present? Elements of quality, is what is supposed to be happening in class happening, and are children learning, or are they just schooling? Those ones, CBC was not to be as a silver bullet for them. So they still have to be addressed through the means that government has. And
so we're talking that, I'm hearing you say that perhaps CBC is actually not the problem. The general spectrum of education could be.
Yes, actually, and not just education, because one of the problems in the broader spectrum is that education cannot solve society's problems. So if there's no water in that community, there's no power, there is no security, there's all these things have to be in place for education to thrive. So I think in such places, ensuring that all these ministries actually work together and not just education, because education will resolve most of the problems that it's facing, because it is dependent on other sectors.
All right.
And unfortunately, the way our government is organized, if I'm in the Ministry of Water or Public Works, you are in education, we don't even talk. You are in your office, I'm in my office. And this doesn't work for such environments.
And we acknowledge that we can't address all this on this very setting. But we can pick a component, and CBC is what it is that we have picked. Do you suppose that we were not prepared for this transition in the first place, Brian? Or what exactly is the problem? Because you realize that there's some people who acknowledge, and even the teachers from these areas, you've seen the stories that we've carried. Everybody starts their statement by saying that CBC was a good idea. CBC could have done us wonders. CBC is it. Yet they continue to highlight some of the problems and discrepancies that lie therein. Is it a transition that we were not ready for?
Well, from where I sit, I feel like CBC is really a great idea. Yeah. In all honesty, the world is really changing. For children to be ready, especially in the 21st century, they say with even the introduction of artificial intelligence, for example, in the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of the jobs, like 50 to 60% of the jobs, we don't know what it will be. So we need an education that will prepare us for that, help us to deal with the different challenges that our world is presenting today, more practical skills and so on and so forth. I think the challenge is in the implementation. It's a new idea. We can't keep saying also as well, like it's a teething problem, but also the right question to ask is, how can we make it work? Because if we keep saying the idea is really good, then what are the things that we need to do so that we ensure that the idea is fully implemented? In addition to government, just going back to my point previously, what also can we also do? Because you see the challenges we are facing, the truth is government cannot solve all our challenges. We all have a role to play. For example, what can parents do to support their learners? Because you see, you can't keep saying it's the role of the teacher alone to make sure that the child is fully educated. The parents have a role to play. How can community members, just as like John Mugo was saying, play their role? How can we all individually make sure that we are contributing to make sure that this program is a success?
Okay, and of course that brings me to the question: is it an advantage or a disadvantage to few? I mean, because then we have seen the discrepancies that we're actually talking about, and in as much as perhaps society would come in to contribute and make this work, CBC in itself, is it painting a picture of something that is a disadvantage and an advantage to different quarters?
I wouldn't say so, Linda. CBC, as it is packaged, should fit within the haves and the have-nots.
But this is not happening. So how do we,
This is not happening because of lack of knowledge, lack of awareness.
Okay.
I'm a parent to a CBC grade 9. And in this particular school, of course, it's private. Every year since they were in grade 3, they have a serious parental awareness day, where when a child transits to grade 4, we are all called to school grade 4 parents, and we are taken through each learning area so that we know what is going on. Of course, this is not happening to the rest of the parents in the rest of the country, that is. So the question is, when will these other parents, because I can talk as a teacher, I can also talk as a parent who is enabled through my son's school.
Right.
So who else is doing this? Is the government also creating awareness of this CBC to the same parents? Because until, as a community, we know what CBC looks like, however long it's going to take, we will still criticize it. So we must come to a point where we all understand what CBC is, and we are able to articulate CBC, this is what is happening in CBC. We were just talking a few minutes ago and telling ourselves the way no one even knows where grade 9 are going to. What are the pathways? Okay, when we are talking about competencies, what is going on? So when you're looking at those children in Baringo and you're talking about digital literacy, self-efficacy, when do these teachers assess these skills?
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to be aware so that when we are sending our children to school, then we want to see a changed child at home, so that it is not just the same old system that is coming back. So that we start questioning the system from a point of knowledge, not from a point of hearsay, speculation, and the likes. Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about awareness, then I am curious, and I would want to ask, just how aware are the stakeholders, in the education sector, so that they can help us then address? Because you see, some of the stories that we've carried tonight are talking about the social economic factors that are, limitations and are bringing in these inequalities that we see affecting the students. One would want to understand just how do we address some of these to ensure that then we have the ability to make sure that the competency-based curriculum gets to address this and benefit students in the country equally. Because, I mean, these are students that are going to be released to the same job market. How do we expect for them to perform? How do we expect to create a balance when they have witnessed these kinds of inequalities while we're just sitting there not addressing them?
What essentially we're talking about here is a budget issue, it's a funding issue. Because we migrated into a new system that is costly, with maintaining the same trajectory of funding, that had been there. And when we look at the cost of CBC, we just don't look at how much money it's costing. Okay. We look at what are called the opportunity costs. If we don't do it, how much is it going to cost us as a country? And I think it's already costing us. Because if we have a crisis of youth now, because of the previous system that was only working for 10% of children, and that's why we have a youth crisis. We went through a system where we were taught to pass KCP, go to a national school, pass, go to the university, get a job. The jobs are not there. So that the frustration that has been there simmering because of the inefficiencies of the previous system is what we are seeing now. Now, what we are likely to see is even worse if we don't take care of this, because then we will be having young people who are thinking and are able to solve many problems, meaning also they're able to create problems. Whoever can solve a problem can also create one when the situation calls for. And I think it's going to be really bad. So I think the way we prioritized housing and all that we would have to, if the president had created, for instance, a CBC fund, so that we are not looking at the 658 billion, because education now, when you look at the national budget, has the highest
allocation.
In terms of allocation,
right.
But that money is not enough. So we have to ask ourselves, how must we now fund CBC so that teachers are well trained, the infrastructure needed is there, and urgently, because this can't wait, because it's about 17 million of children that are going to be in the system by the time we are reaching grade 12.
And funding is a beautiful thing, but then it brings us to where we want to question the policies and whether we actually got the policies right. And if not so, then what are some of the adjustments that need to be made, that is, on the policies that we had, so that then we get to see more inclusivity as well as, equitable share for students to ensure that, across the country, then they almost get to benefit. And even if there's going to be some difference, they shouldn't be as humongous as we witnessed today.
Yeah, I think on policies, as a country, we normally do well. If it comes to the written policies, even when you look at the ideation of CBC, excellent
the
ideas.
Best.
Really, really, really great.
Okay.
You read it, you're like, if our children, even if we could go through the system, this would have been nice, because you'll have identified your talent and started grooming it from such a young age. The challenge, I think, it comes in the bit from implementation.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that is implemented? Like, for example, CBC in and of itself is a very heavy, both to the parent, both to the school. Even in junior secondary, a lot of things are required to make sure that the child is learned, because it's hands-on, a lot of resources are needed to make sure that this is happening. So the question is, how can we contextualize it in so much a way that it's making sense? So that, for example, if you're asking a child, for example, if you're learning about nutrition, create protein or make protein. How do you make protein based on your local context?
Right.
One of the things I remember, even when my brother is, I think in grade 8, one of the things he came to, when he came home, he asked us is, we were told to create oily surfaces. Honestly, I was like, I'm a graduate. I also don't know what oily surfaces are.
Okay.
So how do you also empower parents to be able to support, when you're asking parents to be able to support their kids in learning? Because one of the challenges that is really standing out is there is lack of parental awareness. And there's already a bad stigma that CBC is bad.
Yes.
When, for example, children are sent home, they are sent to give parents homework, like you're supposed to do the work. You'll hear a lot of parents saying, I have to do this work and they already finished.
Right.
But it's more of a supportive role to make sure that you are supporting your child to also learn, creating an humble environment that will enable the child to learn. So we need to think more about how do we implement, and most importantly, even contextualize. For example, if it's a child in Turkana, we can't have equal. The same way this child is learning in Nairobi cannot be the same way this child in Wajir or this child in West Pokot is learning. How do we contextualize it in such a way that at the end of the day, the child can make meaning of what he has learned in school to improve himself, his community, his surrounding, and eventually, become a good citizen, as is one of the things that CBC advocates for.
I listen to this story and I hear some of the teachers there, as well as the principal, saying that, wakati vita ilianza, the teachers fled and they asked for transfer to other, regions that are not risk prone. And I'm just asking myself, so there's the latitude to do that. What exactly happens? And when this transfer letter is accorded, do these people who are now the implementers get to sit down to imagine what happens to the key left in these areas, and why do you want to transfer the teachers, and just how, anyway, where are the teachers as to the policy of the CBC competency and the expectations of these very policies in terms of making sure that they instill the right education?
Yeah. Usually what happens is, yes, the teachers will get transfer letters, but it is assumed that every community has teachers. So the teachers who are getting transfer letters are getting transfers to go to safer grounds, but they do not belong here. So it is assumed that they are teachers who are supposed to be teaching these children. That is why that happens. But unfortunately, that never happens, because if I am coming from such a crisis area, the minute I go to teachers training college, then I won't go back home to look for a job there. So the children are left unattended. And I think this is not just happening to those crisis areas. It also happens even in cities here. If there is an opportunity in a certain area, then we would all rather go and teach there.
Right.
Forgetting what is going to happen, because now what's going to happen to these children, we assume that that is the responsibility of the Ministry of Education. We assume that is the responsibility of the parents and the communities. So the communities, like Brian said, should create a safe environment for me, who is coming from wherever, to be able to come and teach here. So if that does not happen, then I think it is the children who suffer. Because when we were watching that and we could see that there are mobile classrooms, they could move with them. So who is moving with them? Because it is the principal who's saying, we move with these children to where their parents are. So I am a teacher for that matter. So how do I move with these children to where they are, yet my home?
This other side.
This other side. So that begs the question again. That takes us back to the policies, and that takes us back to the Ministry of Education. What provisions are they making for we who are teachers who are supposed to feel safe in these particular environments? Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Before we take a quick short break, we come back to you, John. And I'm just looking at the history of where it all began, maybe 8 years and counting. 2017, major differences as to, what we were used to, with the 844 system. And now we're talking about 6 years of primary, 3 years of junior secondary, 3 years of secondary, and 4 years of undergraduate university. And I don't even know whether I got it right, but as Bosiri highlights, it's important that parents are aware. I just don't know whether there's need for civic education as to this, because I must admit that most of the parents are clueless, even when it comes to the question of transition.
Yes.
That your child is at grade 6, you don't even know what now is going to happen. The only sure thing that you probably know is that you need to buy new uniforms, and then it ends there. And perhaps that is what is being experienced by, teachers who are helping in this transition, teachers who have been introduced, called them the JSS teachers, and it is just confusing. I don't know whether I should task you to tell us what the transition process looks like from whatever age, or perhaps just paint a picture of the struggles of transitions and what needs to be done so that we get it right.
So yeah, let me just explain how CBC has been organized in terms of transitions. So the first transition is at the age of 4 years.
Okay.
So from birth, those babies, small children learn at home, and then at 4 years they transit to PP1, which is now the first year of schooling.
Okay.
So from PP1 and PP2, that's ages 4 and 5. They are supposed to be introduced to things, like counting, recognizing numbers, sounds, and such, language, consolidating. Then the second transition is now from PP1 to grade 1. Which is now at 6 years. Now, it's important that parents understand that it doesn't pay to take smaller children, younger children, to grade 1, because then why are you rushing them? And then they'll finish secondary school, and you won't be able to even get higher education loans board because they won't have turned 18 and gotten an ID. So it's important that parents understand these things early.
Right.
So that transition now to grade 1 is an important one, because now they start now learning more concrete things, and writing and reading and all that. So by the end of grade 3, they are supposed to have covered the basics, the foundations. They should be able to read, they should be able to add, subtract, multiply, divide. Now those 5 years from PP1 to grade 3 is called early years education.
Okay.
And those 5 years, by the end of the 5 years, all the foundation should have been covered. Now we see that there's a big problem because that doesn't happen. But now the transition from grade now 3 to 4, from grade 4, they start now learning a little bit of abstracting things, like now, things that are not very concrete, moving towards abstract, grade 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
So by the end of primary, now in grade 6, what is expected is that a child can be given a newspaper in English and be able to read, or they should be watching us on TV, even if they're in Mandera, and they should be connecting with us, regardless of what Kenyan language they speak.
Okay.
So that is important to understand, because the junior school now, grade 7. As you said, of course, they'll have different uniform and all that. The main reason was to make them feel nice. You know that they are no longer now children,
junior,
they're secondary,
senior,
and
right.
yet still keep them in primary school, because that's the decision that was made, that junior school would be domiciled within the primary school. So to make them feel, have that feeling. But the junior school, years 7, 8, 9, is meant to be that space where a lot of career exposure is happening, where the parents, the child, and the teacher are consulting, very often, so that we identify what the interests, what the capacities, capabilities, career projections of this learner is, and then also now apply. So the things that CBC has, for instance, are life skills and values, which is not just academic stuff, but also life. Education is more holistic. So they are supposed now to apply the foundations they got.
All right. So
that by the end of grade 9, one now can say, generally, I think I'll go into sciences.
And hold it.
Or I'll go
STEM.
to,
STEM. We allow us to take a short break, and then we come back on that level of, from now grade 9, what next? After this break.